Organizations receive records from countless channels: ERPs, CRMs, marketing automation tools, device beacons, acquisitions, partner data, call centers, and the list goes on and on. Each of these touch points often are customer interactions captured at a point in time. So when organizations bring all this data together, they discover that customer records often have slightly different variations on how they shared their data. In one interaction, they might share their preferred email, and in another, they might share their junk email. In one, the customer might share a phone number, and in the other, they might not share a phone number at all. So not only is it difficult to determine which records are duplicates, but those duplicates are dispersed amongst every other customer's duplicates, making the task nearly impossible to deal with at scale. But here's the deal. The problem really matters. Compliance to GDPR and CCPA requires a right to be forgotten. If a customer unsubscribes from one of your systems, you need to know where that person lives in other systems to mark them as unsubscribed. Duplicated customers' data also means automated campaigns make you a pest to the customer and result in costly duplicated efforts. And then there is the constant flow of new data systems being introduced to the organization. This isn't a new problem, though. There are many vendors in the market today that process these duplicate records to identify the copies. However, their method of addressing the problem requires customers to divulge their customer records to the third-party vendor. The stopgap, therefore, is left within extensive legal agreements to keep the data safe. But let's be honest, that data is highly valuable and very tempting to leverage in other profitable ways. Then there's the cost. Most organizations doing this work charge a per-record fee, resulting in millions of dollars in costs associated with deduplication. Up to this point, there hasn't been a productized way to deal with this problem without divulging data. But the technology landscape has changed. Snowflake has the horsepower to bring the processing of these records right within the four walls of your organization. And Truelty is the product that harnesses the power of Snowflake to make that happen. Truelty is an identity resolution code generator that delivers code as a service for processing record deduplication right within your Snowflake instance. And the Truelty UI application is only able to access the metadata needed to drive the control plane. This provides a zero trust model, allowing you to keep your customer data safe. The code generator creates a segregated zone in your Snowflake instance, so the blizzard of queries don't get mingled with the rest of your normal compute. When it finishes processing, it outputs an ID cluster that identifies where duplicates are, which you can use to join to. So how does it all work? First, in the control plane, you can give your centralized data source a name and how it is loaded into Snowflake. Then Truelty will generate a Snowflake query set, which will attempt to match the default semantic categories in Truelty to your existing columns. The matches will appear in the control plane for you to audit. If a column isn't matched, you can add it to the default categories. You can also indicate whether the column has already gone through a validation process with a customer or a third party, which will increase its weight during processing. The next step takes you to a pre-run checklist, which identifies any remaining items that are needed to start the job. Now remember, Truelty's control plane can only pass the parameters to the Snowflake application. The Truelty engine is a Python application that gets scheduled within your Snowflake instance and executes the settings. We'll show you what a full run looks like in the query history, but let's first step you through what it's doing. Now remember, these are records from multiple source systems that have been centralized into Snowflake. So when the engine starts, code is executed in Snowflake to tokenize and sequence a record ID for every record. Now to give you a perspective on how this looks on an individual level, we're going to gather all the versions of one customer, Steve Morris. Now you'll notice the Truelty ID. This is that unique record ID. Now for simplicity in the presentation, we're going to label these long IDs as A, B, C, D, etc. Once the tokens are set, we stripe all the columns into their own tables with the ID and the score assigned from the Truelty control plane. Then the magic starts. First, the engine begins building pair sets. These are pairs that have matches to each other. Now every match gets paired up, then the pairs get scored and chained together. The engine prioritizes the high scoring chains, then does a deep chain on remaining pairs. The overall process is done in an asynchronous DAG model, which we can step you through in more detail in a live presentation. The query history for this is a blizzard of asynchronous queries automatically deployed from the Truelty query generator. In this example, we're resolving 60 million records in 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, you might think this would completely blow away your compute budget on Snowflake, but over 90% of the compute is done with extra small warehouses. Truelty uses a method of loading Snowflake that hyper-packs up to 3 million records per micropartition and pre-optimizes the micropartitions for maximum performance. Truelty also uses Snowflake's capacity to support asynchronous processing, so while in our last example it only took 5 minutes of end-to-end runtime, the system generated 35 minutes of queries, all happening asynchronously, making it much faster. The sizing and scale of compute in each step of the DAG is dynamically assigned by the Truelty engine to drive deep chaining. So if more compute is needed, Truelty will automatically allocate it. 6 to 9 seconds is enough time for Truelty to process 1 million records in Snowflake, which is a blistering time. Perhaps what makes Truelty so exciting for customers is that we don't charge a per record fee. Rather, we have a flat fee structure allowing the variable part to be Snowflake compute. Now, if you'd like to leverage Truelty for your Snowflake instance, you can find us at www.truelty.com.